Hello and welcome to Fireside Fairy Tales. If you've never been here before, my name is Rory and you're watching Varietal Literature's YouTube channel, a cozy little corner of the internet for narrative. And if you've never been here before and you're watching live, you should know that there is a live chat that is currently growing a little crop of potatoes as we speak. If you are not watching this live, the good news is down in the description below. There will be time stamps that can take you to the beginning of the stories. We're doing some stuff from Sunken Castle's Evil Poodles tonight, and of course Sunken Castle's Evil Poodles tends to be a lot of little shorter stories, so there are quite a few stories tonight to get through. So you may want to jump around to them. They all concern the topic of the thumbnail, which is about the devil sort of making natural features in Germany. Don't know why that was the word that took me a minute. I'm good to see a bunch of people who were away for various reasons last week. I see Uncle Kitty, GS, Lizzie Rose, Tammy Morelli, who apparently had a date. Ooh la la. GS and Jump Store. There we are. GS says, I watched a 3-year-old stream of Rory's and he looked exactly the same. Forever old. Okay. One thing I'll mention here up front is if you're listening on headphones, probably isn't going to come through on like big speakers, but I'm hoping anyways. If you're listening on headphones, you may hear some water running. I apologize for that. My partner is into aquariums, and we're taking care of an aquarium for someone for this week. Unfortunately, we didn't have a lot of places to put it. So that's its filter running. But it should be gone by next week. And if you can't hear it, then great. Glad to hear it. Or if you like the sound. Some people like the sound, obviously. Okay. Let me just very briefly do this. There we go. What are we talking about tonight? Well, we are talking about the devil doing landscaping. In fact, we're talking about a very specific style of story where sort of natural features are created by something, right? So a little while ago, I did one where a bunch of features in Germany were created by giants. That's not even a German specific thing. That's a pretty common thing. It's a giant who fell over. It's a giant who dropped something of giant scale. Whatever. It's not an uncommon theme. It is a style of story that I actually quite enjoy. I can't really explain why, because I know that the people who don't enjoy it, they make solid points. But though generally not super popular as a form of tale, I love tales about the formation of natural landmarks, and since the last video did pretty well in the algorithm, pretty well for me, which is, we know what our numbers are. Anyways, my experience of doing this for many years is that for whatever inscrutable reason, that means this video will be seen by basically no one. I don't know why that is, but that is very often the case. So that's perfect time for me to do something I like that is not popular. The other sort of thing about the downsides of these story forms is they are, of course, highly regional and thus involve a lot of language that I do not speak. So here's my usual disclaimer. I do my best to research pronunciations, but I'm no great linguist, and there is no great resource to do that in an efficient way when you're doing so many different language families. So if German is the language you speak, then I suspect this may be frustrating to hear, and I apologize, but I will do my best. Otherwise, you probably find somebody else reading them who maybe does a better job with it. All right. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about ways that the landscape of Germany was altered by the devil. And yeah, I got no further fluff to add to that. If my little crop of potatoes is good and growing, I see Suki's here. Hello, Suki. And I see Tammy and Uncle Kitty are also saying hello. Yeah, I saw a brief conversation about geese. I, of course, live in Canada. Geese are violent creatures, but I also think they're a lot cooler than people give them credit for. Basically dinosaurs, and that's pretty cool. Our first tale of the night, The Devil and the Wildenloh Hill, comes to us translated by Jürgen Hubert in his collection Sunken Castles, Evil Poodles, which is a Patreon where you can pay each month for recently translated, sometimes never translated German tales, folklore. And you can support that Patreon down in the pinned comment below when this story, this show is no longer live. The Wildenloh Forest is a forest-covered hill in the middle of the boglands. It is located barely a mile away from Edinburgh. And while it was fairly inaccessible in early times, it is now bisected by a country road. To be precise, it is actually two hills, separated by the bogs. But the efforts to plant trees in recent times have created a connection between those hills. Once the bogs, which stretched to all sides for miles in some directions, were desolate and uninhabited, but now settlements and the construction of paths and canals have brought the Wildenloh and humans together. When the people of Edinburgh built their first church, the devil became very angry and decided to destroy the city. At night, he pulled a large forest out of the ground near Zwischenahn and carried it across the bogs in order to scatter it across the settlement. And after he traveled some distance, a white rooster was crowing. Then the devil spoke. "White rooster, white, I care for you," and continued on his path. After a while, a red rooster crowed. "Oh!" And then the devil spoke. "Red rooster, red, I don't want to heed," and dropped a part of the forest. This is the Kleine Wildenloh forest. Finally, a black rooster crowed. "Oh!" And black rooster, black, once again you thwart. The devil cried and threw his remaining load into the bog. This is the Grosse Wildenloh forest. But the spot near the Zwischenahn lake, Zwischenahn, where he had ripped out the forest, formed the Zwischenahn lake. This very widespread legend usually does not distinguish between the three differently colored roosters and shouts of the devil. The above version is from Wildenberg. In one narrative, it is claimed that when the devil let the Kleine Wildenloh go, he shouted, "Cock-a-doodle-doo! Here lies a drop of poo." So you get the idea. Its main priority of these sorts of folkloric tales is to account for some sort of natural feature. And I think one of the things that's worth acknowledging that makes it like a less fun story to have read to you is that it really specifically presumes you're going to like be able to point to features as you tell it, which of course can't happen here. But it's the equivalent of, like, I don't know if you had any family members with, like, property. You would go to their property and they'd be like, oh, you see that gash on that tree? That was from when the bears came or something like that. They're doing that, essentially, in a lot of these tales. The thing is, though, because the point of it is to explain natural features, they often don't really have a lot of fixation on making it make sense as a narrative. On the last section, though, cock-a-doodle-doo, here lies a drop of poo, I should give a bit of context, especially if you are coming here after watching the Russian video I did last week about the devils. About the devil. In that one, we saw the devil as kind of like almost a neutral figure, to be honest. Like, he does scummy things, but he really wasn't that bad. And we'll see in other traditions, the devil is like a terrifying monster that you need to run from. But very specifically in German folklore, I mean, it comes up elsewhere, but I see it a lot in German folklore, is the idea that the devil's a buffoon. He's an idiot. And you basically need to... a lot of these stories are basically just to reestablish what a moron he is. And it's an interesting take. It is. So this cock-a-doodle-doo, here's like it's a drop of poo. Whatever it may have meant, at the very least, serves to kind of undercut the image of the devil as like anything intimidating. Now, why does he drop pieces of forest when the rooster crows? I'm guessing they startled him, but maybe there's something deeper here I'm missing. Last week when I asked the question, a lot of people had way more interesting ideas than I did about the meanings of some of the stories I read, so feel free to let me know again here. And if you're like, oh, he's just fishing for engagement, engagement ain't gonna make this thing take off. These are long-form storytelling on a website for people with no attention span. All right, carry on. Our next tale is called The Creation of Porta, Westfalica, which comes to us from Sunken Castle's Evil Poodles, as translated by Jürgen Hubert, who you can support at his Patreon in the pinned comment down below. Once in ancient times, the devil tormented the inhabitants of the Visa River Valley so that they would serve him, but they refused to do so. So then he dammed up the Valuka, a gorge in the mountains close to Bekkirin, which is now part of the domain of Floto, in the northeastern parts of the Herford district. The waters of the Visa used to pour through this gorge into the plains to the north. And now the stream rose up in the valley further and further until the waters almost reached the crown of the mountain range, and then suddenly... pardon me. And then suddenly a mighty thunderstorm arose, and a bolt of lightning split the mountain range. And formed a gorge. And through this gap in the mountains, the water drained away, and the valleys and lowlands became gradually dry again. When the devil saw that his game had been spoiled, he became enraged. He rose up in the air, hurried to the heights, grabbed a whole mountain and took it on his back, and wanted to throw it into the gorge and dam up the mountain gap in this manner. But this load became too heavy during this trip. He fell to the ground on the boundaries of the modern lands of Lipa with his burden, and the rock buried him. This peak is still called Bonstapel or Bobenstapel. And the devil still allegedly sits there and rumbles from time to time. But the mountain gorge is the Porta Westfalica. According to another legend, the entire Visa Valley once used to be a gigantic lake until God sent an earthquake, and then the waters broke at Rammelsberg and drained towards the ocean. Once the land became dry, people started to build on it in this manner, first Hai, then Fischbach, both located at the Visa River, then Deckenbergen, and finally the foot of the Suntal Mountains were built, and these were the first villages of the region. Hello, Mr. Kittenpelt. GS says, I've never heard of the devil being responsible for the topography of the landscape. I think, I don't know if it was for this story, but I think in one of these tales, Jurgen points out that some of these tales, it's the same kind of thing we see in folklore a lot, where it's like, sometimes it seems like it probably always was the devil, or at least some version of that. Sometimes it feels like the devil is being used in place. And in this case, some of this sounds like giants. I see Uncle Kitty has gotten to the same point I did. Could be it was a god or a giant in old pagan folklore. Changed the devil after Christianity took over. I do want to say my usual disclaimer that in the 19th century that was perhaps an overstated story. There's lots of stories that fill the same shape as like a giant or something, but may have always been about the devil. There's deeper reasons why we have the formatting of stories that we do rather than just inspiration of past generations. However, I do think some of these, that's pretty apparent, or at least I would be surprised if it wasn't. All right. A word on the next one before I get to it. It's an interesting story. It's probably the most like story we're going to get to. But there's a couple of things I need to say before I read it. The first is, it speaks authoritatively as if it is speaking on established history, but to my knowledge, this is all folklore. About roughly historical events, but I think the specifics they talk about are just folkloric. I could be wrong. I'm not a historian or really even a folklorist. The second thing I need to say is that this covers a legend of a region that became the fixation of, well, you know who. If we're talking about German folklore, you know who. I guess the roundabout way of saying it is the Volkisch movement, which is faux historical supremacist garbage. But it became a fixation of people from, let's say, a certain ruling party in the 30s and 40s. From there has maintained that status. So I did consider just not reading it. But I don't know if I ever do anybody any favors for that. It's good to know the stories. What I should say is that it stands... It's not a tale invented by them. It's not a tale that seems to be even understood by them. It's an older tale that they sort of assigned their own feelings to, as they are apt to do. But I'd be remiss if I didn't say it. Our next tale is called The Legends of the Externsteine. Comes to us translated by Jürgen Hubert, who runs Sunken Castles Evil Poodles, a Patreon where you can support his efforts to translate German folklore, which will be pinned in the comment below when this video is no longer live. The famous Externsteine rocks can be found between the town of Horn in Lippe Detmold in the city of Paderborn. These are also called the Externsteine by the common people, allegedly because magpies build their nests in the highest of these rocks and hatch their own young, where nobody can reach them. They do not rise up on a mountain, but only on a level field. It is impossible that they have been transported there by human hands, and most likely they ended up there from an upheaval of the ground. This may have been triggered by the flooding of the surrounding sandy hills, which were washed away until these rocks were left behind, rather. They are sandstone rocks of a height of 100 to 125 feet, and some of these rocks are studded with chambers. During the time of Saint Boniface, they were the center of Germanic heathenism, and the Romans captured during the defeat of Varus were killed on the sacrificial altars found within. This was turned into a Christian chapel during the time of Charlemagne, which was mentioned in records as early as the 11th century. 2 centuries later, these rock abodes were the homes of hermits and represented a way station between the monasteries in Verden and Helmstedt. The gargantuan reliefs carved into the rocks probably date back to this period, which in a manner document the victory of Christianity over heathenism. So up to this point, as far as I know, this is roughly historical, and this is where it starts to get less historical. The descent of the cross and its iconography, which can be found on the outermost surface, is probably the oldest stone relief of the Christian period which we have in Germany, and it is also of great significance due to its composition and excellent craftsmanship. Several legends exist of these rocks, which are as follows, and now we get to the definitely just legend stuff. When Charlemagne introduced Christianity to all of Germany by force of arms, which is a hell of a phrase, in the end, only the Duke of the Saxons and his kin resisted them. But the force of this champion of heathenism finally weakened, and his power shrank from day to day. Then one night, the devil appeared before him and promised him to build a heathen temple which would be so massive that the strong Charlemagne would have to leave it in place, and all who were still faithful to the old gods should rally around it in unity. Furthermore, even many of the newly converted would return to the fold, for the Christian faith had only taken weak root in their hearts, and the devil assured him that in exchange he wanted nothing more than that Wiederkind and his people should never forsake the faith of their fathers. Well, the Duke gladly agreed to this, and in exchange the devil promised to complete the construction on the next night of the full moon, which sticks to our German representation of the devil as somebody who can do building abnormally and uncannily fast. It's almost always the devil. I guess the idea being there, you're skipping work is an unholy, unchristian thing to do. From that moment on, the arms of Duke Wiederkind were marvelously victorious against Emperor Charlemagne, and his followers increased day after day. In this manner, the time of the full moon arrived, and the devil began his work. He fetched gargantuan rocks from all ends of the world and stacked them on top of each other to form vaults and halls of a staggering size. But when the giant temple was almost finished, God gave Wedekind a change of heart so that he recognized his own madness. Hurriedly he went into the camp of his enemy Charlemagne and repentantly let himself be baptized. And when the devil became aware of this, he assaulted the temple with great anger. He ripped pillars and walls and gables apart, scattering the rocks all over the landscape. These are the Externsteine rocks, which can still be seen gray and weathered at the entrance of the Teutoburg forest. On the heights of one of these stones there is an abode with a stone for sacrifices, which the devil might have forgotten to destroy. And when the heathen temple had become a Christian chapel, and a mighty cross had been hewn into the rock face, a small bell on the summit of the rock called to the faithful to prayer, and thousands of people streamed to this place of grace. But the devil, who had been so upset that he had not visited this place for a long time, one day desired to revisit his old stomping grounds. He thus roared through the air from afar towards the Externsteine. However, he became aghast when he saw from a distance how a priest stood before the altar of the chapel in prayer, surrounded by a large, worshipping congregation. Then, in his wrath and rage, he grabbed a mighty rock, and he threw it precisely into the gorge, so that it ought to crush the priest. The stone immediately rushed forward with the speed of the wind, but the priest who saw it coming held the cross up high in front of the chapel, and the flight of the stone was arrested. It stood still and suddenly rested on top of a rough cliff face. In response, the devil, who knew very well who had bound the stone to the spot, gnashed his teeth and flew away in impotent rage. But this stone still hangs up there in the heights and appears as if it is about to fall. Indeed, when the mighty winds blow strongly, it will move. And yet nevertheless it hangs up there, for he who stuck it there will not let it plummet. However, the people in the region tell that one day it will crush a countess of Lippe. Another legend tells that the devil had wanted to topple these rocks when the devotion of the pilgrims was still in full swing, and thus he braced against the rock with all force, but he was unable to topple them. But he nevertheless heaved so much that his posterior made a deep impression into the stone, as it can still be seen today. That's my folklore, baby! Devil butt stones! Canada would never be so interesting. Furthermore, a flame emerged from his back, and this flame left a scorched spot on the rock, but this spot is no longer visible, as it has been covered by soil and shrubbery. Now, you might wonder, why did that attract a bunch of fascists? And it's just because it was seen as like an icon of a time from, before Christianity, and they were all fixated on that. It's not important. Okay. I'm gonna drink some water and we'll carry on. That's probably our meatiest story of the day. The next few are a couple of smaller ones with, their own features that I find novel and interesting. The next one is called The Devil's Stone near Königshain. And it comes to us again from, translated by Jürgen Hubert, who created Sunken Castles Evil Poodles, the Patreon that you can go and support, which I will have in a pinned comment down below when this video is no longer live. The Teufelsstein, or Devil's Stone, is one of the biggest, tallest rock formations of the local mountain range. It can be found in wild undergrowth to the northwest of the Hochstein Peak. It is difficult to reach and thus only known to few people. The uppermost slab shows several depressions chiseled in by human hands, a bowl, and several grooves for blood. We'll come to that in a moment. But on the downward slope, the so-called Devil's Seat can be seen. There, the bogey himself sat and darned his trousers. In other words, the devil himself sat there. Lots of devil butt stones in these stories. The holes are where he had to put down his scissors, measuring stick, and twine. Once a herder sat down in one of these openings and fell asleep, and when he wanted to stand up again, he was locked inside and could not get out. And then there's a note here from the original collector of this tale, which is not Jürgen. Jürgen's not a collector of folklore. He goes through archives and translates them. So this would be a person who put it in the archive, probably in the 19th century. That's kind of where most of this stuff was done. And this note is an important one to understand what the heck you just heard. The Christian proselytizers could not take the heathens' faith in their gods completely away. Fair enough. I mean, that was largely true for that millennia. Instead, they shrouded it, pushed it into the background, and made the formerly approachable beings into figures of terror. Thus, the Christian teachings of the devil were filled up with a multitude of beings of higher and lower orders. These now merged into the singular entity of the devil and brought their characteristics with them. I'm just going to make a note here, though. Whenever anybody's talking about folklore, and they talk very broadly, as if it's a big categorical thing, take that skeptically. There is nothing categorical about folklore. I know that's kind of... I mean, I know we have, like, mythos cycles and stuff, but observations and stuff like this, they cannot be so categorical. Anyways, this was a bit of a trend, though, for sure. We do know that. These now merged into the singular entity of the devil and brought their characteristics with them. The stones of the gods thus naturally became the stones of the devil. The later humor of the Middle Ages thus used the sacrificial bulls and so forth for many different interpretations. However, a common characteristic of these interpretations is the notion of the evil-minded but stupid devil who is to be mocked. And I think that's why, and Jürgen goes on to say this in the note, that's probably why the focus of the story is him darning his pants, because it just seems so banal and silly for something of supposed great power. Uncle Kitty says, I can see converting the heathens by sword as appealing to fascists. I think they're actually siding with the opposite side of that equation. If I understand them correctly, which I could care less about. If I guess I'm being honest with myself. They're not worth my effort to understand. All right, carrying on. Our next tale is called The Large Stone Near Reetz. It also comes to us from translated by Jürgen Hubert, who does Sunken Castles Evil Poodles, so you can support it as Patreon, which I'll have pinned down below. There is a large stone surrounded by several smaller stones on the path between Reetz municipality and the village of Reetz. On the large stone, all sorts of shapes of human hands and feet, as well as the claws of animals, can be seen. In particular, the foot of a woman, the foot of a child, a hand, a horseshoe can be recognized. People say that the devil once fetched a publican who had committed fraud against the farmers who patronized her pub. And then he put her on this stone, and suddenly all sorts of spirits with feet of horses and goats arrived. They danced around her and made a hellish ruckus. As the woman had to watch all this in fear of her life, 2 innocent children arrived along the path, and they did not see anything of these hauntings, and calmly sat down on the rock next to the publican in order to rest, and in that moment, all those hauntings disappeared. I do like the kind of like almost Twin Peaks qualities of some of these stories. Like I could see that as a scene in like Twin Peaks, some mysterious cloud spirit or whatever, like shadow spirit drags you to a rock and there's terrible music, and then 2 children just come walking up the road, sit down, and it all goes silent, and that's it. That's all you got. Figure it out. All right. Our next tale is called The Stones in the Davert near Borken. It comes to us from Sunken Castle's Evil Poodles, which is a Patreon for Jürgen Hubert, who translates old German folklore. There are large stones spread apart from each other in the Davert region, as well as along the road from the Münster to the Sauerland regions, rather. There are many legends about the manner in which these gargantuan rocks arrived in this region. For example, it is told that the devil once traveled through Davert with a big sack full of stones, and during this journey his sack scraped a rock lying on the ground and thus gained a hole, and without realizing it, the devil then thus lost several stones over time, which squeezed through the hole and still lie at the same spots where he lost them. And when he reached the boundaries of Sauerland, the hole became bigger and bigger until the entire sack burst in the vicinity of Königshain. In this manner, its so-called Felsenmeer, or Sea of Rocks, came into being. There are a great number of stones in the vicinity of Borken as well, and their size and form has given rise to all sorts of strange narratives, but the strangest aspect of these stones is that nobody is able to count them, for the devil will confuse the senses of everyone intending to do so that they will be unable to utter even the standard series of numbers in a row. When once someone wanted to disprove this and began to count the stones one after the other before assembled farmers, a massive downpour suddenly burst from the sky. And in this manner the non-believer had to run away, and thus prove the claims of the farmers of this region, despite his intentions. So, is that a tale about the devil? Because it doesn't seem very devil-like, right? It doesn't seem to have anything to do with nefariousness. Devils don't tend to drag rocks around, especially really big ones. This could be a lot of different things. This reads as a story that got retold into devil terms. I do find this idea that you can't count them interesting. I don't think I've ever encountered that before in folklore. It's an interesting narrative idea. Or if you're running like D&D games, that's an interesting idea as well. A sort of curse where you cannot count things. I see. GS says, "I hear water now." Lol. I think your aquarium burst. No, that was the sound effects for the strong rain. I see that GS is drinking hibiscus tea. Uncle Kitty is drinking ginger soda tea. No, he's just drinking ginger soda. Gem store. I don't see where your tea is. I know you're drinking one, though. I wonder if somebody, like, had the job to, like, count rocks or something, and they were like, sorry, turns out the devil cursed it. Can't do it. Tried all day. Okay. Our next tale is called The Devil's Mine in Rammelsberg Mountain. And it comes to us from Sunken Castle's Evil Poodles, translated German folklores by Jürgen Hubert. The mines in Goslar are in the Kleine Rammelsberg, or Lesser Rammelsberg Mountains. But in the Große Rammelsberg, or the Greater Rammelsberg Mountains, more gold and silver is hidden than in all those mines together. However, this mine is not to be mined. This mountain may not be mined, for no matter how often people drove a shaft into it, everything immediately collapsed. Again and again and again, and buried the miners in the pits. And this is not accidental. This is because the evil one once ran the mines there, as well as in the surrounding lands. And because of this, it is still possible to find numerous pits filled with slag in the woods where he smelted the ore. For he filled them with wood at the bottom, put the ore on the top, and covered everything with earth. And then he started a fire and refined silver in this way. In this manner he also worked the Rammelsberg itself, and the miners of the region assisted him, and he paid them their wages every week. But one time they had to wait for a long time, and he did not show up. And so one of them sat down on the money tray and soiled it. And then the devil finally arrived, and he drove them all away and exclaimed in his rage that from now on the Grosse Rammelsberg should not be mined before the Kleine Rammelsberg had been emptied out. And now, no matter how often a shaft has been driven into the mountain, everything collapses overnight. Others claim, however, that only 6 miners may work in such a pit, and if any further miners enter it, their necks will be snapped. For this reason, nobody dares to go into it. Now, unless I misunderstand it, someone pooped in the devil's money tray, and so now they're not allowed to mine. The 6 miner one is interesting because 6 being the number of the devil. You can see how these sort of superstitions try to account for each other. Uncle Kitty says, where does one get hibiscus flowers in Ohio, I wonder? Bohemian Ohio doesn't have custom tea shops? The Paris of Middle America. I don't really know much about American states. You have so many of them, it's very hard to keep track. I think the only thing I really know about Ohio is that Scott the Waz lives there. And that probably doesn't mean anything to my viewership. Uncle Kitty says, brave man, that miner. Indeed. Takes quite the person to poop on the devil's stuff. Alright. We only have 2 tales left. The last one being kind of a short little one. This one, I think is one of the more interesting ones, just because, well, I mean, you'll see. It's just a strange one. Uncle Kitty says, Ohio, it's mostly corn. Our next story is called The Large Brewing Pan Near the Village of Warthau. And it comes to us from Sunken Castles, Evil Poodles, German translations by Jürgen Hubert, who you can support at the pinned comment below. There is a quarry near the village of Warthau, which is located between Bunzlau and Gruditzberg. In this quarry, which is found in a forested valley, there is a mighty brewing pan, hewn out of a block of granite. Not talking about a metal pan, so get that out of your head. Different meaning of the word. The locals tell there was once a stonemason in Warthau who was punished for all sorts of lowbrow behavior. The task he was ordered to do as punishment was to chisel a rectangular trough out of a mighty piece of rock within a predetermined time. Fittingly for his wanton character, he spent one day after another in entertainments and diversions, but he put his assigned task out of his mind. And eventually the designated day was about to arrive, and only one final night would pass before its arrival. And there must have been a significant penalty for not completing this work, for he was overcome by overwhelming dread. And in these dire straits he called upon the devil to assist him, and as the latter had long desired to attain his soul, he did not fail to appear. He was eager to help. And the next morning, the locals didn't merely see the rectangular trough. No, it also had an artfully made outflow, and 12 smaller tubs were placed next to it. And the people who hurried to witness this did not find the artisan, however, for the devil had immediately taken his soul away with him, but his sundered limbs were found scattered in the surrounding forest. Now, that's interesting. Never really thought that the devil, would just tear you apart. Sure sounds like a dude was in the forest and got attacked by a bear or something, to be honest. Uncle Kitty says they have a lot of cryptids and ghost stories in Ohio. Oh, interesting. Loveland, Frogman, various dogmen, the Grassman, which is apparently a Bigfoot rendition. Bigfoot is about the only one we really have up here. We have legends about real stuff. Like we have the Spirit Bear, who, even if you don't buy into any notion of like spirituality or anything, it's just a bear that's white, but not like a polar bear. It's I don't even think it's an albino thing. I think it's just a very rare bear. But there's tales around it, and there's pictures of it. We know it exists. All right. Well, on to the last story of the night. Uncle Kitty says, and a lot of Mothman fan fiction. I think it makes sense because my impression of Ohio is that it's like there isn't like a ton going on and it's pretty spread out because it's all farmland. And I think that mixture of sort of like loneliness and boredom, especially in a time before internet and stuff, is a very fertile bed for imaginative storytelling. In fact, one of the pieces of advice I used to give when I used to give writing advice on my varietal show was like, go bore yourself. You know, turn everything off. Just be bored. You'll have ideas. Your brain will fill the space. Boredom is the bedrock of creativity. All right. Our next tale is called The Devil's Walls near Blankenburg. And it also comes to us from Sunken Castle's Evil Poodles, translated German folklore by Jürgen Hubert. The farmers in the vicinity of Blankenburg state the following about the origin for the formation of the Teufelsmoor, or Devil's Walls. They say that the evil spirit once dared to split the whole globe with God, and in this manner the great God would only have one half of the world to reign over, while the other half was supposed to fall to him. He thus wanted to make us start with dividing the world in these lands, and erected this wall which was intended to continue throughout the world. God had observed his game and his villainy for some time. However, finally he ruined that wall, since it was much too tall, and forbade the devil to continue its construction, and for this reason only these pieces of the wall were left. However, there is also another legend about the matter. This legend claims the following. The devil argued with dear God for a long time about the rulership of the earth. Finally, a division of the land that was inhabited at the time was agreed upon. The flat rocks to the south of the village of Thala, between Blankenburg and Quedlinburg, which the people call Tons are the dancing square of the devil, were supposed to mark the dividing line. The devil erected the Teufelsmoor while dancing jubilantly, but soon the half of earth which has been designated for him seemed too small for the ever-greedy one, and a new dispute arose which ended with the valley at the foot of the rock being given to him as well, and after this the devil erected the second Teufelsmoor on the north side. And if you're going weird, just remember it's just about natural things. Oh, we have a new person in here. Wolflair? Wol? I don't think I know how to say your name. Talking about the sort of generations of similar cycles of lore: Green Man, Serenus, Arthurian, Green Knight, Wild Man, Dog Man, Sasquatch. Yeah, that makes sense. My kind of idea with a lot of this stuff is that, like, we just have sort of our human brain has kind of natural paths of imagination and curiosity, and so you will find what if us but bigger and things like that in a lot of places. It's why I think, like, lineage tracking of tales is kind of a mixed task. You know, it depends on who you're talking to, but someone will say, oh, that lore is just from this lore, and that's the original lore. And, like, I don't know that there is original lore. I don't know what the value of even tracing it back in that way is. there's definitely some obvious influences and passed on stuff. But the truth is, I think given complete isolation, two cultures will come up with similar things. Not entirely similar, but you will see like cycles of similar curiosities and stuff. Because as a species, you know, we got a lot of things in common. We're hungry. We're scared of the woods. We want to be loved. And I think those kinds of base impulses inform our imagination. But that's just my view. And there is some stories about the German landscape as apparently defined by the devil. Some of them seem more devil-defined. Some of them seem to be something like gods or giants or something like that being recast as devils. As I said, it'd be interesting to see them all. But actually, if you ever do go and support Jürgen Hubert's translations efforts on Patreon, one of the things you get with the monthly stories that you get, it's the big document of thousands of these tales, is you get his commentary. And a lot of the time he puts a lot of work into his commentary, not the least of which being trying to track down these locations that are mentioned in these stories, because he lives in Germany. And he talked about how difficult it is for some of these, because some of them make reference to, like, I can't remember the one about the Rammelsberg mountains. He mentions that in his commentary that he doesn't really know of anybody calling them kind of like, I think it was the Rammelsberg mountains anyways, calling them the way that the story calls them, these kind of like high and low Rammelsberg mountains, that there are lots of places that could have been named that over history and whatever else. So as a result, you know, these tales, it's interesting, these tales exist, but they're kind of almost unmoored from their reference in a lot of ways. But if you happen, some of them are definitely, we know where they are, right? We talked about that before, the one that Himmler was obsessed with, and maintains status with a bunch of creepy weirdos to this day. That's a known one. It's just, you know, there's lots of fascinating versions of that through cultures around the world, or geography around the world, of just the big rock that looks like it's going to tip but stays there for centuries. Yeah, some of these, it's not even clear where they reference anymore. All right. Gia says, I never heard about Mothman until I saw that movie, and then I found out it's a thing in the eastern states. I only knew it as, like, online folklore, where everybody was, you know, basically being tongue-in-cheek about it. I didn't know it had any greater history than that, so that's interesting. Okay. Well, that's all the stories I have about the German devil doing landscaping in Germany. I certainly hope people enjoyed the stories, whether they lurked or joined in. Thanks to everybody who dropped in and said hello today. And thanks to everybody who kept me company as I read. Tammy says, thank you for the stories, Rory. Great being back. Love seeing everyone. Hope you all have a wonderful night. I hope you do as well, Tammy. Glad to hear that you were away for good reasons for once. And yeah, I hope the rest of you have a good week. As for me, I'll keep the fire going. You folks have yourself a good sleep.